So, hello. I don't even know how to explain what's happening. So, on the Discord, basically, I guess I was, like, not paying attention for this, but some people got into, like, a roleplay of She-Ra, and apparently Kyle died, and then, which is our favorite character, like, unironically, he's the best character, so shush. And so someone, like, made a transcript of what happened in the roleplay chat. Yeah. And then someone made, like, a rewrite of Kyle's death to make it, like, more dramatic and everything. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna write about Kyle's death.
Oh, no.
And I wrote 8 pages.
It's not even double-spaced.
It's not double-spaced. It's 8 pages.
Why did you do this?
This is my 8-page, completely unedited. I need you to know that. I have not looked at this since I wrote it a half an hour ago. And it's gonna be horrible. I started reading it to Ethan and his reaction was really funny, so I'm gonna record it. Also, I'm sick, so if I cough 5 million times, deal with it. Okay, are you ready?
No.
Me either. Kyle sank into his bed with a sigh. Another day, another battle, another chance to prove himself reduced to a mindless barrage of blame Kyle.
Oh.
His eyes wandered up to the bunk above his. His heart lurched a little when the bed shifted. When it was obvious the bed frame was still standing, Kyle relaxed again.
Poor boy.
He tried to clear his mind of the memories of the cruel prank his roommates had pulled a few months ago where they had rigged the top bunk to come crashing down on him.
No!
As soon as he lay down.
Why?
Kyle rolled his eyes.
That's so mean. That's so accurate. It's something that they would do.
I know. That's why I said it. I was like, he needs some trauma in every area. Oh. Like when he goes to bed, he's afraid. Because that's how it is for Kyle.
Oh, it's so sad.
Kyle rolled his eyes and pulled his thin, scratchy blanket over his body. Hey, Kyle. A voice from above whispered. That was not a whisper. Hey, Kyle. There we go.
Oh, no.
Kyle paused. Yeah? How'd the battle with the princesses go? It was okay, I
broke
guess.
all of my ribs.
Kyle mumbled. Really? The voice replied mockingly. You know, I'm surprised you're still alive based on how many times you got eliminated in training yesterday.
Oh.
With a sigh, Kyle put his head on his pillow and didn't respond. Too bad, the voice continued. It would have saved us a lot of trouble if you didn't make it.
Who's speaking? I want to kill them.
Some random character
It's the edgy no eyes person.
Lady, woman.
Edgy no eyes.
Also, I don't know if there's like separate dorms for boys and girls in this, because I feel like typically there is in armies, but also in She-Ra nobody's allowed to be straight, so I feel like that would be a problem. Kyle's heart sank. He ran his hand through his messy blonde hair and blinked hard to keep his unauthorized tears in. As much as he tried to hide it.
Unauthorized?
Unauthorized!
Just Shadow Weaver comes in. You're wasting tears! Another demerit for you!
You are lucky you do not have demerits. Okay, I'm fine. As much as he tried to hide it, it hurt. The constant belittling words, the never-ending kicks and shoves, the ever-present whispers and eyes flickering in his direction. Am I just a punching bag for the Horde? Kyle thought to himself. They don't think I can do anything, but they bring me along on missions to defeat She-Ra. Maybe they hope I won't come back. Maybe...
Oh, no! My heart. See, the thing that makes me love Kyle the most is he's, like, sad and, like, depressed and, like, beaten down and everything, but he's still, like...
Sweet and
he's still,
cute.
Yeah, like, instead of, like, just... hardening a shell around him and becoming like I refuse to feel any emotions. I'm used to it and like making a defense mechanism. He's still like defenseless and sad.
I know. He's just a little like
he needs to be protected. A hug. Kyle needs a hug. Oh, like Vanya needed a hug and then Luther broke her spine.
Yes, exactly. Freaking Luther is the worst person, and it's his fault that any of this happened. That's
I was like shouting at the screen, "Give Vanya a hug, give her a hug," and then he did, but he rudely did it.
Too much of a hug. Too much.
Too much hug.
Too much hug. Maybe they hope I won't come back. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe it's for the best if I just die.
No, Kyle, no.
Okay.
Maybe it's for the best if I just die.
Ouch. Foreshadowing? I mean, what? Kyle tried to think of something, anything else, but the thoughts kept creeping up in the back of his mind. Minute after minute. Even the rebellion doesn't want me. Hour after hour. But I can't stay here like this. He didn't know how long he'd been lying there, but sleep was completely evading him. He rolled over and let his eyes wander. In the darkness, he could just barely make out the shape of a clawed-up mattress. Adora. She used to sleep there before she left. A little spark of excitement flourished in Kyle's chest. Maybe I could leave too. Maybe I could just run away and nobody would notice. Maybe his body jolted upright as he remembered falling for what felt like miles and crashing down onto a pile of his peers.
Oh no! Seahawk, why?
He instinctively rubbed his back.
Oh.
How come the rebellion welcomed Adora with open arms, but they threw Kyle off a cliff? Because she's powerful. She has something to offer. And Kyle had nothing. Kyle wrapped his arms around his knees. Is this what the rebellion was? Something that claimed to be good but only accepted people who were beneficial to them, leaving the weak ones to die? Was the rebellion any better than the Horde? Kyle looked up at the one tiny window in the room and flinched when he saw how low the moon was. Soon the shrill ring of the morning alarm would pierce the silence, and the peaceful calm of the night would turn into the overwhelming clamor of the morning. He couldn't bear to stay here another day. But he knew before he knew what he was doing, he was on his feet and walking towards the door. He didn't even bother packing his few belongings. He didn't want to remember this place. Maybe he did have something to offer. Adora left the Horde over a month ago, so he had more up-to-date information on their plans. Well, what they bothered to tell him, that is.
Oh.
And maybe Adora would understand him more than Bo.
He knows all about their dustpans and their trash chutes.
And the structure of their bunk beds.
Or the lack thereof.
Oh my gosh. Maybe Adora would understand him more than Bo. She left the Horde and joined the rebellion. Maybe she could see some value in him and give him a chance. After all, they did used to be friends. With his somewhat deluded hopes, Kyle reached the door and turned sharply to the left. He crouched down on his hands and knees and started carefully removing the cover to the ventilation shaft. In his years with the Horde, he'd at least learned one thing: how to get around without being seen. It helped after particularly embarrassing training sessions when people were lying in wait to tease him. The grate came off the wall with a subtle scrape, and Kyle scurried inside. He replaced the metal sheet as well as he could from inside the small corridor and began to crawl into the darkness. Okay, time skip. Please don't hurt me, Kyle cried as the guard practically dragged him into the castle. I didn't even bring a weapon. I just want to join the rebellion. We'll let the queen decide about that, the guard said shortly. Kyle was half running, half walking, and half tripping over himself as he tried to keep pace with a tall woman who had a firm grip on his arm. He almost ran into her as she abruptly stopped in front of the pair of large, decorated doors. Kyle was in awe as he gazed around the castle of Brightmoon. Nothing in the Horde had ever been so pink.
Or clean.
Come on, the woman said as she opened the door and roughly pulled Kyle inside. Inside the large room was an oval table surrounded by ornate golden chairs. The walls were covered in murals of people who must have been important for some reason or another. Seated in the chairs were several people who were all staring directly at Kyle. The guard took a step forward. I apologize for interrupting, Queen Angela, but I found this Horde boy lurking by the— Kyle? A voice piped up in disbelief. Kyle's head snapped towards the disturbance, and he saw someone rising from her chair and staring at him in bewilderment. Hi, Adora. A tense silence fell across the room as no one could seem to think of anything to say. Kyle looked down at his shoes in an attempt to avoid eye contact with anyone. I found this boy by the castle gate, the guard spoke up, and he claims he wants to join the rebellion. Kyle could feel the stares burning into his soul, and the silence weighed on his shoulders. Oh, hello.
The power has fluctuated. The ecosystem is suffering.
It's a awesome tag. Kyle could feel the stares burning into his soul, and the silence weighed on his shoulders like the sandbags the Horde used for training. Adora, do you know this young man? Adora, do you know this young man? A different voice broke the silence. Kyle glanced up and was relieved to see that all the eyes were now on a slender woman with long pink and purple hair. And were those wings on her back? This must be the queen. Yes, Adora said uncertainly as she took her seat again. He was in my cohort when I was working with the Horde.
Noticeable lack of teeth on the lady, though.
Huh?
Because they always train with the princesses, like, with big teeth and stuff.
Oh, yeah! She doesn't have fangs, and she isn't bright red.
Well, that's weird.
And do you have any reason to believe that he would truly defect from the Horde, or is this another one of their traps? Adora looked at Kyle quizzically. I'm not sure. He's not exactly the guy Hordak would choose for a secret mission to infiltrate the rebellion, but that could be a strategic choice. We're more likely to trust him because he looks so— Adora gave him a once-over— weak.
Oh.
Kyle shrugged and tried to smile. I think I have something I could say. Kyle froze. That was definitely Bo's voice. Bo, the one that Kyle betrayed the Horde for. Bo, the one that said he'd be Kyle's friend. Bo, the one who watched him get thrown over the edge by Seahawk and didn't come back for him. There he was, standing awkwardly at the table of princesses. If I may interject, of course, Queen Angela, Beau stammered. The Queen nodded patiently. You better not be looking, Ethan.
Oh, yeah.
You better not be looking.
I'm not looking.
Nothing's happening yet, but you better not be looking. When Glimmer and I were being held prisoner by the Horde, Kyle was my guard, Beau began. I asked him where they were keeping Glimmer, but he wouldn't tell me at first. But after a while, he came back and told me where she was. I asked him why he did that, and he said it was because nobody appreciated him in the Horde, and all he wanted was a friend. Beau trailed off as he made awkward eye contact with Kyle. He abruptly averted his gaze to the Queen, and as he finished. But, that didn't exactly work out. But he did tell me where to find Glimmer. Beau looked around at the people seated beside him and then quickly sat down. Kyle? Adora questioned. Is that true? Kyle shifted nervously. Yeah, all the Horde does is hurt people, and they don't think I can do anything. So when I saw how much Beau cared about his friends, I decided that I wanted to join the rebellion too, and get out of the Horde. But, Kyle glanced to the ground. I guess Beau was too busy to help me.
Oh!
It's so sad.
And then he yoked me off a bridge!
An awkward silence enveloped the room. Kyle looked up at Beau, but he quickly broke eye contact and turned away uncomfortably. Well, we're going to have to discuss this, Queen Angela said. It is quite a big deal to accept a former Horde member. I can't do a British accent when I'm sick, oh my gosh. A former Horde member into our ranks. We made an exception with Adora, but that's because, well, she's She-Ra. Take Kyle to a secure room for the time being. Time change cut scene. It wasn't like the room was uncomfortable. Actually, it was far better than Kyle's living quarters in the Horde. It was a small room with a bed so fluffy that it almost resembled a cloud. The sky blue walls were a stark contrast to the cold, charcoal-colored ones of the Fright Zone. Everything Kyle needed was provided for him, and he didn't even have to share a room with his cohort. He was alone. Alone and unable to leave without being abruptly pushed back in by the guard who was constantly outside his door. It was fun for the first few hours being free from the abuse of the Horde, but this new room was no more than a luxury prison. He wondered when Queen Angela and the princesses would come to a decision about him. Sure they were busy with the war, but were they really so busy that no one could even bother to visit him for 3 days? Kyle sank into his pillow-like bed with a sigh and studied the intricate paintings on the ceiling. The great battles and epic heroes were drawn in gold and shone in the sun that was streaming through the room's many windows. Did I do the right thing? Kyle wondered to himself. He had escaped from the Horde, but it was beginning to look like he'd never be useful to either side. He'd never be a great hero like the men and women depicted on his ceiling, if no one ever trusted him enough to let him out of this room. Kyle sat up. Footsteps! Could it finally be someone to let him out of this room? Had they decided to give him a chance to prove himself? Kyle ran to the door and put his ear up against it. The footsteps grew closer. It sounded like multiple people. He could almost make out their voices. He closed his eyes to concentrate harder. Laughter from Glimmer, a serious-sounding remark from Adora, an exclamation of "Best Friend Squad" from Beau. The footsteps faded away. Kyle sat back in disappointment. He should have known. This wasn't the first time they passed by his door. Had they forgotten he was in there? Did they even know? One thing was for sure. Beau had no intention of bringing Kyle into his precious best friend squad.
Oh!
He didn't help him in the Horde. He admitted that to the Queen, and he still wasn't making an effort to be friends. Kyle folded his arms in frustration. Well, Kyle said to himself, guess it's time to count floor tiles again.
Guess I'll die.
Guess I'll die. Kyle was pretty sure there weren't supposed to be massive amounts of Horde soldiers approaching the castle from the Whispering Woods.
Pretty sure.
Pretty sure that's not supposed to happen. He stared out the window in shock. Even though they had much bigger things to focus on, Kyle couldn't help but feel that the Horde was coming to get him and punish him for running away. He was suddenly glad to be in his prison of a room. Brightmoon is under attack! A voice shouted from beyond Kyle's door. We need all units prepared for battle! Several pairs of footsteps retreated from the room, and Kyle could hear a growing, distant clamor in the castle as everyone prepared for battle. Kyle slowly walked over to his door. He didn't hear anything. He peered under the door. Even the guard forgot he was guarding someone. I was trying to imply that, like, they needed all the soldiers, that's why he's left, but, you know, that works too.
The Horde completely forgot that he was there too, probably.
I mean, they didn't care that Adora left, so they wouldn't care that Kyle left. Except they wouldn't have anyone to blame all their problems on.
Oh, suddenly people have to actually be responsible for their failures.
What a horror. Kyle slowly walked over to his door. He didn't hear anything. He peered under the door. No boots. He knocked timidly. No response. The guard was gone. He grasped the doorknob. Surely they wouldn't. He twisted it, but it didn't budge. Locked. Brute force was not an option. Kyle's ribs would probably break before the door. He quickly paced around his room looking for another option. Of course, a coat hanger! He wrenched open the closet door and took a wire hanger. Come on, the only thing you were good at in the Horde was being sneaky, Kyle whispered as he bent the hanger into the right shape. Don't fail now! He ran to the door and shakily inserted the wire into the lock. He wiggled it around, willing it to work until he heard a soft click. He dropped the coat hanger and took a deep breath and twisted the doorknob. The door swung open to reveal an empty hallway. Kyle stood in the doorframe, frozen in shock for a moment, and then darted to the right. Okay, I just escaped a prison. What do I do now? The sounds of battle carried through the castle. I can't escape, because there's a battle right outside the castle, Kyle frantically whispered, and besides, I have nowhere to go, but I can't stay here and let them forget about me for months on end. Maybe, Kyle glanced down both directions of the hallway, maybe if I fight for Brightmoon in the battle, Queen Angela will finally trust me enough to let me join the rebellion. And maybe Bo and Adora and Glimmer will actually want to be my friends. This is stupid, Kyle said with a frown. There's no way I can help in the battle. I can't do anything right. A new sense of determination filled his body. But I have to try. Kyle ran down the hallway, following the sounds of the battle. He picked up a discarded dagger he found along the way. When he was reaching the front of the castle, he was greeted by absolute chaos. There was no telling which side was winning or losing. The sound of metal against metal filled the air, and battle cries echoed in all directions. The once beautiful castle.
Hey, there's actual enemy people.
I know, people exist.
People of the Bright Moon Land.
Of the Bright Moon Land. The once beautiful castle lawn was now crowded with soldiers of both sides, and the ground was littered by bodies of those wounded or worse. The occasional firing of a horde cannon shook the ground, making Kyle wince. He clutched the dagger close to his chest and closed his eyes. He let out a few steady breaths before charging into battle. He immediately threw himself to the ground to avoid getting decapitated by a flying sword. He army-crawled his way to an exploded tank and stood up behind it. He glanced around desperately, looking for somewhere he could be useful that wouldn't result in his death or serious injury. Adora. She had been thrown to the ground not 20 feet from Kyle, and her sword had fallen too far away for her to reach. If he could just run there, grab her sword, and give it back to her, she would know he was on her side. Without a second thought, he ran for it. Dodging various weapons and bodies on the ground, time seemed to slow down as he got closer to the sword. He was acutely aware of danger all around him, but not enough to make him afraid. He kept his eyes on the target. The ear-splitting sound of an explosion rang through the battlefield, but Kyle kept going.
Darn littering tanks.
I know, right? A piece of shrapnel was hurtling directly at him, but he was going too fast to stop. At the last second, Kyle dove for the sword, letting the deadly metal fly over his head. He shut his eyes upon the harsh impact with the ground and tried to regain his breath. He reached out his arm and felt the hilt of the sword. He grasped onto it and felt his heart leap in his chest. He'd done it! He actually did something right! Now he just had to take it to Adora. As he was about to stand up, he felt the sword violently ripped from his hand. He recoiled in shock and opened his eyes. Hey, Kyle. Catra. She stood over him, with one hand draping the sword casually over her shoulder. Kyle's heart sank. I'm sure you were going to give that sword to me once you picked it up, but I thought I'd save you the trouble, Catra purred. No, Kyle said with the only strength he could muster. I was going to give it back to Adora so she could defeat you and the rest of the Horde.
Oh, why would you say that? You're gonna get yourself killed, man.
I mean, she already hates Kyle.
Oh, poor Kyle.
She was already on to him.
Oh, Kyle.
Catra clutched her chest in feigned hurt. Kyle, I thought we were friends. I don't have friends, Kyle stated.
Oh.
What about your precious rebellion? Catra asked while raising an eyebrow. Kyle hesitated and looked away. He opened his mouth but couldn't seem to find any words. Catra began to laugh. Oh, I see. She crouched down and met Kyle's eyes. They don't trust you, do they? Did they send you into this battle to die? She placed the tip of the sword under Kyle's chin as she hissed. I bet you thought Adora would be your little traitor friend, but guess what? She betrayed you just like she betrayed me. Catra's eyes darted something behind Kyle. She gasped and yanked Kyle up by the collar. Catra, let him go! Adora yelled from behind Kyle. Oh, so you do care about him, Catra mused. Typical. You treat someone like dirt until they're in danger, and then all of a sudden you're a saint. She turned Kyle around to face Adora and grasped him tightly against her. He heard the sudden swish of a sword and felt the sharp edge against the left side of his neck. Kyle froze. Catra, don't do this! Another voice pleaded. Kyle looked up and saw Adora and Bo standing side by side. He flinched as is there a problem?
No, I'm just laughing because they're like, oh yeah, now we totally care.
Exactly, because that's what they would do. That's how She-Ra works.
That's how the She-Ra writers work.
Yeah, because they hate Kyle, but I'm sure if he was like about to be murdered, they'd be like, oh, now we're the good guys. Isn't that what they're doing?
We're supposed to be the good guys.
Kyle looked up and saw Adora and Bo standing side by side. He flinched as Catra tightened her grip and dug her claws into his skin. He felt a warm trickle of blood run down his arm. That's funny, Catra said through clenched teeth. Little Kyle just told me he didn't have any friends. Looks like it's your lucky day. Adora paused. We are your friends, Kyle. Kyle cocked his head, but instantly regretted it as Catra pushed the blade closer to his neck. You could have fooled me. Oh, that's Kyle. Whoops. You could have fooled me. Nobody visited me in my room for 4 days. Adora looked around uncomfortably. Kyle, she said while trying to keep an even tone. I'm so sorry I didn't come to see you. I was off training and fighting most of the day, and when I got back, I guess I just... She tucked her hair behind her ear and glanced at the ground. Forgot. Kyle's heart sank a little as he felt Catra snicker in his ear. Kyle, Bo began. I know I wasn't a good friend to you back in the Fright Zone. I guess I was just so concerned about Glimmer that once you told me where to find her, it's all I could think about. Bo's eyes welled up with tears. I know I should have helped you, and I should have come back for you after Seahawk threw you over the edge, and I should have talked to you and apologized in another battle, but...
I'm a bad friend!
I guess I was afraid you'd hate me after how I treated you. Kyle, we want you to be our friend, Adora pleaded. My friends are the most important people to me in the world. Kyle felt Catra's body tense, and her claws sank deeper into his arm because she's salty. I don't know what I'd do without Bo and Glimmer. I'd love to be your friend if you would just let him go, Catra, please. Catra froze, then relaxed. Okay, she said as she loosened her grip on Kyle. What? Adora asked in confusion. You just asked me to let him go, Catra said sarcastically, so I'm letting him go. She released Kyle. Here, let's trade. She handed Kyle the sword of protection and picked up the small dagger from the ground where he had fallen. Gripping the sword close to himself, Kyle spun around to face Catra and began backing away. Oh, I don't want to do this! Sorry. Okay.
I'm very confused. What horrible thing is Catra gonna do to him? Is she gonna stab him in the back? Literally?
No, because he's facing her right now. That's an important detail.
Okay.
He's backing away. Catra, Adora muttered. Catra rolled her eyes. What? You said your friends were the most important people in the world to you, Catra smirked. So I just wanted to do this as a thank you for how great of a friend you've been to me. Adora gasped as Catra raised her dagger and sent it flying towards Bo's chest. Without thinking, Kyle leapt in the path of the knife.
What? No, why would he do that?
Because he's the best.
No.
Oh, I don't want to... Okay. He felt a heavy impact in his chest and fell to the ground hard.
No, Kyle, no. I'm gonna die.
Warning, this is super dramatic, and I just went off when I was writing.
Why?
I'm sorry. Okay. He frantically tried to regain the breath that had been knocked out of him by the impact, but each desperate breath sent searing pain up and down his entire body like an electrical current. Everything around him sounded muffled as if he were underwater, and he couldn't seem to focus his vision on anything. He heard Catra shriek as if someone had attacked her, and he tried to raise his hand to feel the source of the pain. Someone grabbed his hand and laid it back on the ground. Kyle felt someone's presence over him. The person was speaking to him in an increasingly frantic manner, but Kyle couldn't make out his words. But the voice, it sounded like Bo. Kyle jolted as his chest felt like it was on fire. I want to die! He raised his hand up once again to do something, anything to make the pain subside. Bo grabbed his hand and held it firmly with one hand as he used the other to carefully pull the knife out of Kyle's chest.
Why would you do that?
Because he wants to put pressure on it to make it stop bleeding, and also Kyle's the worst, or Bo's the worst, so there. Kyle writhed on the ground as it felt like his lungs were filling with lava. He felt a firm pressure on his chest, and he could make out the words, "It's gonna be okay," being repeated over and over. He tried to regulate his breathing, but he was assaulted by the overwhelming feeling that he was drowning. Any amount of air he could get in his lungs was combated by liquid. Struggling away from Bo's grip, Kyle turned over onto his side and began to cough and desperately gasp for air. He tasted blood. Wheezing, he looked down and saw a sea of red. He pressed his hand against his chest and pulled it away to see it covered in blood. He stared at it in disbelief and disbelief and confusion until he felt someone pull him backwards and lay him back on the ground. Adora's horrified face hovered over him as she pushed both of her hands down on his wound. She had a cut just below her eye, and her hair was disheveled. "You're gonna be okay, Kyle. We just have to stop the bleeding," she said reassuringly.
You gotta figure out how your She-Ra healing powers work immediately.
Exactly, that'd be a great time!
Otherwise, he's gonna die.
And Kyle looked up at her. "Catra," he muttered. "Don't worry about her. She's taken care of for now," Adora said quickly. "Don't try to talk, okay?"
Well, I guess you pointed your sword at her and didn't kill her again.
Probably. Adora's words blended into the sounds of the battle surrounding her. Kyle's heart pumped loudly in his ears, and each beat felt weaker than the last. He saw Bo come around to the other side of him and kneel down. Adora removed her hands, and Bo pressed a piece of fabric to Kyle's chest. Kyle clenched his fist to cope with the piercing ache in his body, and he felt Adora take his hand. "Kyle, you saved my life," Bo whispered. Kyle tried to smile. A tear rolled down Bo's cheek. "Thank you." Kyle took a rattling breath. You don't have to talk, Adora said while squeezing his hand comfortingly, which is apparently a word. Kyle shook his head in determination. I forgive you for everything. Thank you for being my friends in the end. He took an unsteady breath.
I did something right.
Just promise you'll be better to any others like me.
Oh. He's like a Christ figure all of a sudden.
Exactly, that's what I was gonna do. I was like, he's gonna be forgiven and he's gonna sacrifice his life because he's just like that.
Oh my gosh.
Because Kyle died for the sins of She-Ra. Of course we will, Adora assured him. I'll make sure Seahawk never throws anyone off a cliff again, Bo stammered through his tears.
Thanks, that's the least you could do.
Kyle smiled. Thank you, friends. He let out a long sigh and began sinking. The pull was too strong to let him take another breath, but that was okay. He was starting to feel better.
No.
He couldn't really feel anything except Adora's hand holding onto his. The two faces above him seemed to fly farther and farther away until all he could see was darkness. He heard a few panicked voices saying something about losing him, but Kyle couldn't understand what they were so worked up about. It was so peaceful here. He smiled, squeezed Adora's hand, and let go.
Is that the end?
Yeah.
Nah.
I just killed Kyle.
Didn't deserve this.
I don't know why I created this.
I feel pain.
How'd you feel about it?
I mean, I'd still watch this better than She-Ra.
Ooh.
What was that sentence that I just said?
I'd
I'd still watch this better than
She-Ra.
She-Ra. I guess that's two sentences? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Or, like, you could put a, like, semicolon in there.
Sure, yeah. Semicolons. Pulling out the expert grammar.
Yeah.
Why did he have to jump in the way of this person who yoded him off a cliff?
He didn't yote him off a cliff.
Shush.
Seahawk.
He's still a terrible person.
Because Kyle was going to be the Jesus figure. Forgive them for they know not what they do. See?
You're the worst.
You're welcome.
He escaped from She-Ra at last.
He did. He's free. He's at rest now.
He got the recognition he deserved in the end.
Yes, he had friends. Well, bad friends, but he had friends.
They weren't friends. I wish that the writers of She-Ra would actually do something with him because he's got potential, and then he's just there, and then he's treated like a joke, and he's just abused.
I know. I want to see a character arc where like Bo apologizes and where Kyle learns that he can do things, and he like does something cool, and he has confidence.
Yeah. But no, now he's dead!
I'm sorry, Kyle, you've died 3 times. I think that's enough.